The wind didn't just move across the Wyoming high plains. It hunted. It scraped the earth raw and pushed grit deep into the skin of anything unlucky enough to be caught beneath it. Mara walked through that wind with her head down and her body angled forward as if she were fighting a living enemy. She had lost track of how many days she'd been walking. Maybe 3, maybe 4. Time blurred when your feet were bleeding and the cold felt like knives. Her boots were ruined. The thin soles had split open, and she felt every sharp stone and frozen rut through them. Her left heel was rubbed raw. The blister burst and her socks stiff with dried blood. In her arms she clutched a small bundle of clothes, wrapped in a rough shawl that smelled of lye, soap, and stale tobacco. It was all she owned now, all she carried from the life she was running from. To the west, mountains rose like jagged teeth. Snow already clung to their peaks, promising a winter that would kill anyone caught without shelter. The sky above was bruised purple, heavy and low, as if pressing down on the world. There was no sun, only a dull gray light that offered nothing but the truth. She wouldn't survive another night out here. Her knee hit the ground when she stumbled again. A sharp cry rose in her throat, but she swallowed it. Crying wasted warmth. Crying wasted water. She pushed herself up, hands shaking so badly she could barely keep her bundle from slipping. You cannot stop, she told herself. If you stop, the cold takes you. Silver Creek wasn't far behind her, but the memory still stung like a fresh burn. A place where men lost their money and women lost their choices. She had rented a room in a boarding house that turned a blind eye to how a woman paid, until the new proprietor, a self-righteous woman with a Bible in one hand and a ledger in the other, decided Mara was bad for business. Respectable. The word still tasted bitter. Respectability was something Mara stopped owning at 16, and nobody ever let her forget it. Now, as the afternoon light thinned into a watery dusk, she saw it. A thin ribbon of smoke rising ahead. Faint. Almost torn away by the wind, but it was there, hope in the shape of a gray line twisting upward. Where there was smoke, there was fire. And where there was fire, there was a roof. Mara forced her legs to move faster, stumbling toward the shape that slowly emerged from the gloom. A cabin. Rough-hewn logs weathered to iron gray. A small corral with 2 horses braced against the wind. No other cabins nearby. No neighbors. No help if she chose wrong. But at least it wasn't the open plains. She reached the door. No porch, just a single stone dragged into place as a step. She hesitated, hand hovering over the rough wood. She knew what men thought when they saw a woman alone on foot, no horse, no baggage. Broken, desperate, easy to use. But the cold was in her bones now. She knocked. The sound was barely a whisper in the storm. She waited, teeth chattering so hard her jaw ached. She knocked again. Harder. Please, she whispered against the door. Please. A latch clicked. The door opened slowly, pulled inward. A tall man filled the frame, blocking the orange glow of a fire behind him. He wore a heavy wool coat and a battered hat pulled low. In his right hand was a Winchester rifle, held easy but ready. He didn't speak. He just looked. His face was a map of hard miles. Maybe mid-30s. Wind and sun had carved deep lines around his eyes and mouth, a scar cut from his temple into his beard. His eyes were dark and unreadable. Mara tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. The warmth from inside hit her suddenly, making her sway. The room tilted. "Help me," she rasped. The man didn't move at first. He looked past her, scanning the horizon for others. A husband? A pimp? A posse? Seeing nothing but the barren plains, he looked back at her torn shoes, her shaking hands, her blue lips. Something flickered in his expression. Not pity. Maybe annoyance. Maybe resignation. He stepped back an inch, lowered the rifle. "Come in before you let all the heat out," he said. His voice sounded like gravel under a wagon wheel. Mara stumbled inside. Her legs buckled, and she pitched forward. He didn't catch her, but he grabbed her arm to steady her against the doorframe. "Sit," he ordered, nodding toward a small table near the stove. The cabin was a single room, clean, sparse, warm. A cast-iron stove glowed in the corner. A narrow bed was pushed against the far wall. Saddles hung from pegs. Everything functional, everything simple. He handed her a tin cup of cold water. She drank greedily, coughing as she swallowed. He ladled hot stew into a chipped bowl and set it before her. "Eat slow," he said. She tried, but hunger made it impossible. When she finished, he finally asked, "Where'd you come from?" "Silver Creek." "That's 3 days walking." "Maybe 4? She stared at her bleeding knuckles. "I had nowhere else." He watched her, reading her like a trail sign, the bruises on her wrists, the way she flinched when he shifted his boots, the way she kept her eyes down. "You're running from something," he said. Mara didn't answer. He sighed. "Name's Eli Turner." "Mara." Eli crossed his arms. "You can sleep here tonight, but tomorrow morning you head for the stage road. I'll point you where to go." Her stomach dropped. The stage road was 2 days on foot. She wouldn't survive it. She needed to stay. She needed warmth, food, shelter. She had nothing to trade. Except the one thing men always wanted. She stood, legs trembling. "Mr. Turner," she whispered. He looked up. Her voice cracked. "I'm not worth much, but I'll do anything for a roof over my head." The room went still. The wind outside held its breath. Eli's jaw tightened. His hands balled into fists, and for a moment, Mara thought he might throw her out. Instead, his voice came low and sharp. "No," he said. "Not here." And the look in his eyes was not desire. It was anger at the world that made her believe that was all she was worth. The storm grew louder through the night. Wind pushed against the cabin walls, as if trying to rip them apart. Loose snow hissed along the window frame. Mara sat near the stove, arms wrapped around herself, watching the fire glow against the iron door. Eli moved around the cabin with quiet purpose, hanging his coat, checking the horses through the side window, adjusting the damp wood stacked beside the stove. He didn't look at her much. That was almost worse. Most men stared. Most men measured what they could take. Eli Turner had looked at her once, really looked, and then turned away as if the sight bothered him. She wasn't used to that. She didn't know what to do with it. "You can take the bed," he said finally, nodding to the narrow cot against the wall. "I'll sleep in the chair." She shook her head. "I'll sleep on the floor." "Not in this cold. Take the bed." Mara hesitated, then stood slowly and touched the edge of the mattress. It was firm, clean, smelling faintly of cedar. Not the smell of cheap perfume and stale cigars she'd grown used to in Silver Creek. She sat lightly on the corner, unsure if she had the right. Eli dropped into the wooden chair near the door. He rested one boot on the rung, leaning back like a man who had done this every night for years. His rifle leaned against the wall within arm's reach. Mara swallowed. "You don't have to stay awake." "I do." "Why?" Quote, "Because someone knocked on my door in the middle of a storm and told me she was willing to give up her dignity just for a roof." His voice was calm, almost too calm. "So I'm keeping watch, for both of us." Mara stared at the floorboards, her cheeks burned with shame. "I didn't know what else to offer." "You shouldn't have to offer anything," he said. "Shelter is shelter. A person either gives it or doesn't." She lay back on the bed, pulling the thin blanket over herself. Exhaustion pulled her down fast. Her last thought before sleep took her was that she shouldn't have survived this long. Maybe she was only alive because she'd reached this cabin and this man instead of another. She woke hours later to the sound of horses. Not Eli's. More than one. Moving fast. Eli was already at the window, looking out from behind the curtain. His entire posture had changed. Shoulders tight, hands ready, breath shallow. Mara pushed herself upright. "What is it?" Quote, "Riders," he said. 3 of them. Her stomach twisted. The cold inside of her spread deep. They found me. Quote. Eli turned his head just enough to see her. Who? She hugged her arms. I told you I left Silver Creek. I didn't tell you who I was running from. You're telling me now. Mara's voice shook. A man named Wade Carter. He runs the biggest gambling hall. People owe him. He collects however he wants. I worked upstairs. When I tried to leave, he sent men after me. Said I was property until my debt was paid. Eli's eyes darkened in a way that made the room feel smaller. Are those his men? She nodded once. Eli moved to the rifle, checked the chamber, set his jaw. They won't take you. Mara's breath caught. You don't know what he'll do if they find me here. I don't care what he'll do, Eli said. I'm not handing you over. The horses stopped outside. Heavy boots hit the frozen ground. Voices rose, rough, confident, amused. Men who thought the world belonged to them. A fist slammed against the door. Turner, open up! Mara froze. They knew his name. Eli didn't react. He stood between her and the door like a wall. Go behind the bed, he said quietly. Stay low. Quote. She crouched behind the cot, heart hammering so hard she felt it in her throat. The men outside laughed. Come on, Eli, one called. We know she came this way. The boss wants her back. She ain't worth dying over. Another voice, mean, lazy, added, we'll even leave you a cut for the trouble. Eli didn't move. The cabin stayed silent. The leader's patience snapped. Last chance, Turner. Step aside. Eli raised his rifle. Mara's fingers clutched the blanket. All the cold she'd endured on the plains felt like nothing compared to this moment. Her whole world narrowed to the sound of her own breath and the weight of the silence outside. The door rattled. Then, the first man kicked it hard. Wood splintered at the frame. Eli took one step forward, anger simmering low beneath the surface. His voice was steady, controlled, dangerous. You boys take one more kick at that door, he warned, and you ain't walking back to Silver Creek. For a moment there was nothing. Then a cold, mocking chuckle. You always did think you were better than the rest of us, Turner. Fine, have it your way. Boots shuffled, snow crunched, and just as Mara dared to breathe, a gunshot exploded through the night. Mara screamed and ducked as the bullet tore through the top corner of the door, splintering wood across the room. Eli didn't flinch. He lowered one knee, aimed, and fired back through the crack in the frame with a single, clean shot. A man outside shouted in pain. Everything erupted at once, shouting. The scrape of boots, the metallic shuffle of guns being drawn. Mara pressed herself against the floor as Eli stood his ground, shoulders squared, rifle ready, protecting her with the calm of a man who'd seen too many wars and refused to lose this one. He glanced back at her only once. You're safe, he said, no matter what happens tonight. Another gunshot hit the door. Another scream tore through the snow. And the night turned into a fight neither of them could walk away from. The night had turned into a storm of gunfire. Each shot echoed across the frozen plains, bouncing off the cabin walls like thunder. Mara pressed herself tight against the floor, her hands over her ears, praying Eli wouldn't fall. Outside, men shouted orders and curses as the wind carried their voices into the cracks of the cabin. Eli fired again with steady aim. The muzzle flash lit his face for a split second, showing a look that wasn't fear or rage. It was focus. A man who had already decided he wasn't letting darkness take one more thing from him. Another bullet tore through the window, shattering the glass. Cold air burst into the room. Mara gasped as splinters scattered across the floor. Eli moved without hesitation, grabbing her arm and pulling her behind the stove. Stay low, he said, eyes scanning the cabin. They won't leave, she whispered, shaking. Not until they have me. They're not getting you, he said. Not while I'm breathing. The shouting outside grew louder. Boots crunched in the snow as the men spread out, circling the cabin. Mara could hear the fear building in her chest like a rising tide. She tried to speak, but her throat closed around the words. Eli crouched beside her. Listen to me, he said quietly. I've dealt with men like this before. They're worse than you think, she said. Wade Carter, he doesn't forget. If his men die out there, he'll come himself. Eli's jaw tightened. He can come. I'm not handing a woman over to a man who thinks she's property. A sudden silence fell outside. It was so sudden it felt unreal. Eli held his breath. Mara did too. Then a new voice drifted through the darkness. Smooth, cold, confident. Wade Carter. Eli Turner. The voice called. I think we need to have a talk. Mara felt her stomach drop. She recognized that voice. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Men listened to Wade because they knew what he was capable of. Eli didn't answer. Wade continued. You have something that belongs to me. Send her out, and this ends clean. Keep her, and I'll burn that cabin to the ground with you in it. Mara grabbed Eli's sleeve. You can't fight him, she whispered. He glanced at her, his eyes steady. I'm not fighting for him. I'm fighting for you. Before Mara could reply, Wade's voice grew sharper. Turner, you know me. You know how this goes. Eli stood slowly, keeping his rifle ready. He walked to the window, staying out of sight, and looked out through a gap in the wall. Wade was on horseback, flanked by 2 more riders. 3 men from earlier lay wounded in the snow, groaning. Eli raised his voice. You're not getting her back. A cold laugh drifted in. You think you can protect her? You think you can protect yourself? Eli didn't waver. I can, and I will. Wade's tone shifted, angrier, impatient. This is your last chance. Eli stepped back and looked at Mara. Her fear was clear on her face, but there was something else too, a spark she hadn't felt in a long time. The belief that maybe, just maybe, she mattered. He handed her his revolver. If anyone gets past me, shoot. Mara stared at the gun, her hands trembling. I've never. You will if you have to, he said. I trust you. Her breath caught. No one had ever said those words to her. Not once. Outside, Wade snapped his fingers. 2 of his men dismounted and started moving toward the cabin, guns drawn. Wade stayed on his horse, watching like a snake waiting to strike. Eli took position at the broken window. The first man crept close, thinking he could surprise him. Eli fired. The man dropped. The second man ran for cover behind the corral fence. Snow kicked up around him as Eli fired, forcing him to duck. Wade yelled orders from the saddle. Mara crouched lower, gripping the revolver with both hands. Her heart thudded so loudly she thought Wade might hear it. Then, wood cracked behind the cabin. Mara spun around. A 4th man, one who had circled around earlier. He kicked in the back door with a crash, splintering it off its hinges, his gun raised, his eyes wild. Mara felt her blood freeze. She lifted the revolver, but her hands shook too badly to aim. He stepped toward her, grinning. The boss is gonna be happy. He never finished. Eli slammed into him from the side, tackling him into the wall. The gun fell from the intruder's hand as the 2 men fought, boots scraping, fists swinging. Eli drove his shoulder into the man's chest, slamming him onto the floor. The man tried to get up. Eli didn't give him the chance. He threw a hard punch that knocked the stranger cold. Breathing fast, Eli grabbed Mara's arm. We end this now. He turned toward the front door, rifle reloaded, eyes burning with purpose. Together they stepped outside into the freezing night. Wade Carter sat tall on his dark horse, snow swirling around him like smoke. His pale eyes narrowed when he saw Eli step out with Mara behind him. You're making a mistake, Turner, Wade said. No, Eli replied. You did. Without waiting another second, Wade reached for his gun. Eli fired first. Wade dropped from his horse, hitting the snow with a heavy thud. Silence fell across the plains. The remaining men hesitated, uncertain now that their leader lay motionless. Eli stared them down, rifle steady, breath sharp in the cold air. Pick him up, he commanded. Take him back to Silver Creek. Tell them this. She's not his property. She never was. None of the men argued. They lifted Wade, mounted their horses, and rode off into the night. The wind eased. The world grew quiet again. Mara stood beside Eli, shaking from more than the cold. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk your life for me? Eli looked at her with tired eyes. Because you walked through a storm believing the only thing you had to offer was yourself, and I won't let the world teach you that lie again. Her breath caught. For the first time in years, she felt something warm settle in her chest. Hope. They stood in the snow as the first soft flakes began to fall. Slow, quiet, peaceful. Mara wrapped her arms around herself. What happens now? Eli looked at the sky, then at the cabin, then at her. Now, you stay here until you're warm, until you're strong, and after that, we figure it out together. She nodded, tears burning her eyes. For the first time, she felt safe, really safe. And for the first time, Eli let himself smile. Let's go inside, he said. Storm's easing up, but you're still freezing. Mara followed him into the cabin, leaving footprints in the snow that the morning sun would freeze into silver. But tonight she wasn't running anymore. She had found a place. She had found a future, maybe even a home.